There's a very familiar story in the life of Jesus having a conversation with his disciple Simon Peter by the Sea of Galilee after our Lord's resurrection. It's in the last chapter of the Gospel of John, John 21. I'll read this here from the English Standard Version. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." I'm going to stop right there. Very familiar story as we hear it in English. But there's more to that story that gets lost in translation. And for that, we're going to go to our friend, the Interlinear Bible, at BibleHub.com/interlinear, and bring up our familiar entry gateway to the Greek New Testaments. I'm going to choose the Greek interlinear chapters. I'm going to choose John, chapter 21. And here is that chapter. I'm going to enlarge it so we can get a closer view of that text in charting at verse 15. Okay, here we are at chapter 21, verse 15. And I'm going to scroll up to that conversation between Jesus and Peter. So Jesus asked Simon of John, "Agapos me." Agapos me. "Do you love me?" Pleon tuton, more than these. And Peter answers, "Nai Kyrie." You know that philo say. This is Peter's answer here. You know that I love you. Now, right off the bat, we see an interesting contrast here. Jesus didn't use this verb philo. Philes would be philes me. It was the way he would ask the question. But he used agapos me. And that is a very familiar verb. We click on the number here, which designates Strong's Concordance ID number. And here we have the verb agapao is the verb, which means to love. Now, what about agape? That's a very familiar word to us in reference to love. Well, this is the verb agapao, and if we click the right arrow here, we find it comes up to the noun agape, which means love as a noun, and it has other good usages and meanings as it's used in the New Testament as well. But today we're focusing on the verb agapao. And as we read the description, it means more than just simply love, but it often involves God's love, His love for us, our love for Him, and the love that He shows through us to others. All this context and grammar information on the left side of this page here. Going back to the other word that Peter used, philo, say, and we click on this number here, and it opens it up to the dictionary form of that verb, which is phileo, which means also to love, but it has the nuances having affection for, being fond of, love in terms of friendship. The noun form that we're maybe more familiar with is this one, philos. Actually, it's an adjective, but when it's used as an adjective without the noun that it's modifying, remember we call that a substantive adjective, and it becomes a noun. As an adjective, it means beloved or friendly, but as a noun, it can mean friend, it can mean friendship. And there's also, this is the masculine form that's generally used, but we have an instance in the New Testament where the feminine form, philia, is used. But there's an interesting note here I think we find helpful under philos. It says it's a friend, somebody who's dearly loved in a personal, intimate way. And it has a contrast here. It says the root phil, as in several words that begin with this prefix meaning one who is loved. It conveys experiential, personal affection. While agapao, the verb, is based on a value-driven, decision-based love, of course, which can also include affection. But as we see these words used in the New Testament, what we find, the contrast is, we find that philos, or the verb phileo, is the form of love that is based on feelings. While agapao, or the noun agape, is love that is motivated by a commitment. Definitions here, we find the word friend as being associated with philos. And so to help me understand better this discussion that Jesus is having with Peter, Jesus asks, "Do you love me?" And he's asking for that high level of love that comes from commitment. And Peter answers, in a sense, "You know that I'm your friend." So on the scale of things, Peter's frankly admitting that his love for Christ is broken. He doesn't have the high level of commitment that he thought he once had, that he demonstrated a few weeks earlier when 3 times he denied Jesus. So Jesus responds, "Feed my lambs." Then Jesus said to Peter a second time, "Simon, son of John, agapas me." Same question. And Peter gives the same answer, "Nai Kyrie." You know, philos, you know I'm your friend. Jesus says to him, "Shepherd my sheep." Then the 3rd time, Jesus said to Peter, "Simon, philes me, are you my friend?" And Peter was grieved because he said to him the 3rd time, "Philes me." And Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, you know all things. You know, philos." What I read in this is that, again, Peter is admitting to Jesus that he has a broken love. And in that 3rd question, philes me, Jesus is in effect saying, "That's good enough. I'll take that." And he commissions Peter into his service. Notice something else as I was preparing this lesson that I hadn't noticed before. But when Peter answers Jesus' question, he says, "You know that I love you." The word he uses for know here, oidos, is what appears in the text. I'm going to open this up in a new tab up here. and it comes from the Greek word eido. It means to see, to know, perceive, to be aware of, appreciate. And so essentially says, you're aware of the fact that I'm your friend. Second time, he answers that question exactly the same way. You're aware that I'm your friend. And then the third time, when Peter was grieved because Jesus had changed the question from agapas me to philes me, Peter answered with a very strong word, the more familiar word. Gnoskes comes from the Greek verb gnosko, which to be to know, perceive, or recognize, acknowledge. It's a stronger form of knowledge, simply to be aware of, but to know it intimately, as it were. And so Peter's acknowledging how well Jesus really does know him, as he also knows each one of us. Well, now we need to do a concordance study on each of these words and see the specific ways they are used in various contexts. And I will leave that bit of research up to you. That's your homework. I put links below in the video description. And as you read through the verses that have agapao and agape in them, see the breadth and depth of meaning and application. Also be on the lookout for 3 places where agapao, the verb, applies to unrighteous love, loving the wrong things for the wrong reason. You may agree with me that the application of that word in those contexts is really a description of what idolatry is. Also look carefully through the verses where phileo and philos are used. There's some interesting surprises waiting for you, and I won't spoil the fun of discovering them for yourself. Now, in this study of John chapter 21, there is one troublesome question that bothers me. In all likelihood, Jesus and Peter held their conversation in either the Aramaic language or the Hebrew language. And what we read here is John's eyewitness report of what he saw and heard, and translated for us into Greek. So what were the analogous Hebrew or Aramaic words that John heard, which he translated for us into Greek as agapas me and philose? Well, that's a puzzle for which I don't have an answer. But you can still have fun digging into the text.